She stood at the end of the line, torn boots no rank on her faded uniform, and everyone thought she was a janitor who wandered onto the range. When Lena Park asked for the black Talon, the entire training yard erupted in laughter. "Give her a broom instead," a soldier yelled, but then a helicopter landed. 3 figures in black stepped out, carrying a weapons case marked with a claw symbol. And when the lead operative solemnly said, "Welcome back, Commander Ghost Eye," every eye in the yard froze. Lena's hands didn't shake, but her chest felt tight, like someone had reached in and squeezed her heart. 3 years ago, she had walked away from a life that left scars deeper than the ones on her skin. At 25, she'd been a ghost moving through missions where her name was a whisper and her face was a secret. Operation Falcon Down had been her last stand, a single shot that stopped a crisis but cost her more than she could ever explain. She'd seen too many faces in her scope, too many lives flicker out. So she'd left choosing a quiet life where no one knew her, where she could blend into the background. But standing in that dusty yard at Langford training camp with the laughter ringing in her ears, she felt the past pulling her back, her boots peeling at the soles pressed into the gravel. She didn't meet anyone's eyes. She didn't need to. Their voices carried all the judgment she'd heard before scorn dismissal, the kind of cruelty that spills out when people think they've got you pegged. The supply soldier Pivot. Callahan leaned over the counter, his smirk wide enough to show his crooked teeth. He was wiry with a buzz cut so sharp it looked like it hurt, and eyes that gleamed with the joy of putting someone down. "You think you're getting a rifle," he said loud enough for the whole line to hear. Recruits turned, their snickers building like a wave. A tall guy with a gym bro build, his gold chain glinting under his collar, stepped forward. His name tag read Puvto Torres. He crossed his arms, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Supply depot's over there, sweetheart." "You're in the wrong line." Callahan laughed, tossing a rag onto the counter like it was part of the show. "Yeah, give her a broom instead, that fits better." The crowd roared, heads tilting back, hands clapping. The air turned thick heavy with that pack mentality where everyone's just waiting for the next jab. Lena didn't flinch. She nodded once her lips pressed tight and stepped back. Her fingers brushed her faded jacket, adjusting it slightly like she was smoothing out the moment itself. A few steps away, a group of recruits lingered, their eyes locked on Lena as she retreated. One of them, a lanky soldier with a permanent slouch named Pivot. Gorman called out, "Hey, don't trip over your boots. They look like they're about to give up." The group burst into laughter, some slapping their knees, others nudging each other like it was the best show in town. Lena paused her back to them, her fingers curling briefly into fists before relaxing. She turned her head just enough to catch Gorman's eye, her gaze steady, unblinking. The laughter faltered Gorman's smirk, twitching like he had been caught stealing. She didn't say a word, just held his stare for a beat longer than comfortable, then kept walking. The group fell silent, their bravado deflating like a punctured tire. Gorman muttered something under his breath, but it lacked the earlier venom. Lena's boots crunched on the gravel, each step deliberate, as if she was carving her presence into the ground. "Hey, if this story's grabbing, you take a second to open your phone. Like this video, leave a comment below and hit that subscribe button. It means everything to share stories like Lena's stories about people who get laughed at but keep standing tall. All right, let's keep going." The laughter trailed her like a shadow as she walked to the barracks. Recruits whispered as she passed their eyes, flicking over her plain clothes, her black hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She didn't wear makeup, didn't need it. Her face was striking deep brown eyes that seemed to see through you, a quiet beauty that didn't shout but held you if you looked too long. But they didn't look long. To them, she was just the woman who didn't belong, the one who got in the wrong line. By dinner, the mess hall was alive with it. Heard she tried to grab an M for a recruit, said his voice cutting through the clatter of trays. Who does she think she is? Another, a woman with a tight ponytail and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, leaned in. Her name tag read, Pivot Ellis, probably some desk clerk who got lost, she said, her voice sharp. Look at her shoes. Lena sat alone at a corner table, her tray holding a slice of bread and a small scoop of mashed potatoes. Her fork paused when Ellis's voice hit her ears, but she didn't look up. She just took a slow bite, her jaw steady, her eyes fixed on her plate. Later that evening, Lena stood outside the barracks, the sky bruising purple as the sun dipped low. A group of recruits had gathered near the flagpole, their voices carrying in the cool air. Ellis was there holding court, her nails glinting as she gestured. I bet she's never even held a real gun, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Torres nodded, leaning against a post, his gold chain catching the last light. Yeah, probably just some wannabe trying to play soldier. Lena was close enough to hear, but far enough to be unnoticed, her silhouette blending into the dusk. She shifted her weight, her hand brushing the dog tag in her pocket. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the tag, the metal biting into her palm. A younger recruit, hesitant, piped up. Maybe she's got some training. Ellis laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Training? She's got janitor written all over her. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned away, her boots silent on the grass, leaving their words to echo in the empty air. The next morning, the technical check was a standard drill. Every recruit had to strip and reassemble a weapon to prove they could handle it. The instructor, Sergeant T. Malone, was a man in his 40s, all sharp angles and no patience. His clipboard was his lifeline, and he barked orders like he'd been born doing it. When Lena's turn came, he barely glanced at her. Park right. Let's make this quick, he said, sliding an M4 across the table. The room was packed to recruits, leaning against walls, some sitting on crates, all waiting for her to mess up. Lena placed her hands on the rifle, her movements slow, deliberate. Then she closed her eyes. The room went quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. Her fingers moved like they knew the weapon by heart. Pin, bolt, spring, each piece set down with precision. 19 seconds later, it was back together, not a single screw out of place. She opened her eyes. Malone's pen froze midair. Did you work in weapons tech? He asked, his voice low like he didn't want the others to hear. Lena's gaze met his, calm and steady. No, I just used it every day. The room didn't stay quiet for long. As Lena stepped away from the table, Torres leaned over to Gorman, his voice loud enough to carry. Bet she just memorized the manual to look cool, he said, his sneer pulling his lips tight. A few recruits chuckled, but others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to Lena. She didn't react, just wiped her hands on her jacket and moved toward the door. But as she passed a crate, wobbled under a recruit's weight, creaking loudly. Lena's hand shot out, steadying it, before it could tip, her reflexes sharp enough to make the room pause. The recruit, a nervous kid with acne scars, mumbled a thank you. Lena nodded, her expression unchanged, and kept walking. Torres's smirk faded, his hands fidgeting with his chain. Malone watched her go, his clipboard forgotten, his jaw tight, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. The whispers started again, but they were different now. Less mocking, more uneasy. No way, she's just a grunt. A recruit muttered, his voice barely audible. Bet she's lying, Torres said. But his tone lacked the earlier confidence. Lena didn't stick around to hear more. She walked out, her boots scuffing the floor, leaving the room to stew in its own questions. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind of fall morning that stings your lungs. She stopped by a bench, her fingers slipping into her pocket to touch an old dog tag. It wasn't hers. It belonged to a friend, a sniper she had trained with years ago, lost in a mission that went wrong. The metal was worn smooth from her touch, a quiet reminder of why she'd left that life. She held it for a moment, her thumb tracing the engraved name, then tucked it away and kept moving. At the edge of the camp, Lena found a quiet spot near the supply sheds, where the hum of generators drowned out the chatter. She sat on a crate, her hands resting on her knees, staring at the horizon, where the trees met the sky. A maintenance worker, an older man with grease-stained hands, paused nearby, wiping his brow. He glanced at her, his eyes lingering on her faded uniform. "You don't look like you belong here," he said, not unkindly, just curious. Lena's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I get that a lot," she said, her voice soft but clear. The man nodded like he understood more than he let on, and handed her a bottle of water from his cooler. She took it, her fingers brushing the cold plastic, and nodded back. He walked away, whistling softly, leaving her to the quiet. She opened the bottle, took a sip, and let the coolness ground her, her eyes never leaving the horizon. The days that followed were tense. The camp was a small world, and word of Lena's stunt spread fast. Recruits watched her differently now, some with curiosity, others with resentment. At breakfast, she overheard Torres talking to Ellis. "Probably just a fluke," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "Anyone can get lucky once." Ellis nodded, her nails tapping her tray. "Yeah, I bet she can't shoot for shit." Lena didn't react, just stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the mug. But her shoulders stiffened just for a second, and she set the spoon down a little harder than she meant to. Across the room, a younger recruit, a skinny kid with glasses, watched her. His name tag read Pavitit, Nguyen, He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered like he was trying to figure her out. Lena noticed, but didn't acknowledge him. She finished her coffee and left the mess hall's noise fading behind her. During a morning briefing, the recruits were gathered in a lecture hall, the air thick with the smell of old coffee and sweat. Malone was up front going over range protocols, but the room's attention kept drifting to Lena seated alone in the back. Ellis leaned over to a recruit next to her, her whisper sharp. Look at her sitting there like she's special. Probably thinks she's hot stuff now. The recruit, a broad-shouldered woman with a nervous laugh, giggled, glancing at Lena. Lena's hands were folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on Malone, but her fingers twitched slightly, the only sign she'd heard. Nguyen, sitting a few rows ahead, turned his head, his glasses catching the light. He didn't laugh, didn't join in. Instead, he pulled a notebook from his bag and scribbled something, his pen moving fast. When the briefing ended, he left the notebook open on his seat, a single word visible: enough. Lena passed by her eyes, catching it, and paused for half a second before moving on. Shooting drills came a week later. The range was a wide stretch of dirt and targets the air sharp with gunpowder and tension. Lena was last in line again. Nobody wanted to pair with her, not after the M4 incident. Pivot. Lucas Reed, the unit's top marksman, stood out like a sore thumb. He was all charm, with a smile that could sell cars and a swagger that said he knew it. Anyone paired with her is guaranteed an easy win, he said, his voice carrying across the range. The others laughed, but it was nervous now, like they weren't sure anymore. Malone paired Lucas with Lena anyway. Lucas flashed his grin, leaning close. Don't worry, I shoot fast but never hurt anyone. Lena's lips curved just a fraction, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She adjusted her stance, her hands loose at her sides, and said nothing. Before the drill began, a gust of wind kicked up dust across the range, scattering papers from a nearby table. Recruits scrambled to grab them, but Lena moved faster, snatching a fluttering sheet mid-air, a target log with handwritten notes. She handed it to Malone without a word, her movements precise, almost too quick. The recruits nearby froze their eyes wide, like they had just seen a magic trick. Lucas's grin faltered, his hand twitching toward his rifle. Malone took the paper, his brow furrowing, and muttered, "Thanks, Park." Lena nodded and stepped back to her spot, her boots leaving faint prints in the dust. The moment passed, but it lingered in the air, a quiet ripple that made the crowd shift uneasily. Lucas adjusted his cap, his jaw tight, and turned away, muttering something to Torres that nobody caught. When her turn came, the range was dead silent. 5 targets, 5 shots. Lena raised the rifle, her movement smooth, like water flowing over stones. Each bullet hit dead center, the cracks echoing across the field. Lucas went next, his jaw tight, his hands steady, but not steady enough. He missed 2 shots, the bullets kicking up dirt far from the target. The crowd didn't cheer like they usually did for him. Malone stepped forward, his eyes narrowed, his voice sharp with curiosity. "What if we blindfold you?" he said, half challenging, half testing. A recruit handed over a strip of cloth. Lena didn't hesitate. She tied it over her eyes, her fingers steady. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine. She tilted her head, listening. 5 more shots, 5 more bullseyes. When she pulled the blindfold off, Malone's face was white. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena handed him the rifle, her movements calm, and walked away. As she left the range, a small crowd parted to let her through, their whispers buzzing like static. Nguyen was there, standing off to the side, his glasses fogging slightly in the cold. He didn't say anything, just watched her pass, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Lena's eyes flicked toward him, catching the faint nod he gave, almost imperceptible. She didn't nod back, but her pace slowed for a moment, her boots hesitating on the dirt. Behind her, Torres muttered to Ellis, "Bet she's got some kind of trick up her sleeve." Ellis snorted, her voice low but venomous. "Trick? She's just milking the attention." Lena's hand brushed her pocket where the dog tag rested, and her fingers lingered there, pressing the metal against her skin. She kept walking, her silhouette sharp against the setting sun, leaving their words to fade in the wind. The camp was different after that. The whispers weren't just rumors, now they were questions. Who was she? Why was she here? Nguyen started sitting closer to her in the mess hall, not talking, just watching. Once, he slid an extra apple onto her tray when he thought she wasn't looking. Lena noticed, but didn't say anything. She just took the apple, her fingers brushing the bruised skin, and tucked it into her pocket. Later, alone in her bunk, she cut it into slices with a small knife, eating slowly, her eyes fixed on the wall. The knife was old, its handle worn, the kind of thing you carry when you've seen too much to trust the world. She didn't think about the range, didn't think about Malone's question, but her hands moved slower than usual, like they were carrying something heavy. During a late-night training session, the recruits were paired for hand-to-hand combat drills under floodlights that buzzed like angry bees. Lena was assigned to spar with a burly recruit named Piffert. Malone, no relation to the instructor, a guy with a boxer's build and a laugh that sounded like gravel. "Go easy on me, all right?" He said, his tone mocking as he cracked his knuckles. The others formed a loose circle, their faces lit by the harsh light. Malone lunged, his movements sloppy but heavy, expecting an easy win. Lena sidestepped her body fluid like she was slipping through water. She didn't strike back, just deflected his blows, her hands light but precise. The crowd murmured some cheering Malone, others watching Lena with growing unease. After a minute, Malone was panting, his face red. Lena hadn't broken a sweat. She stepped back, her eyes steady, and said, "You done?" The circle went quiet, Malone's laugh dying in his throat. He nodded, wiping his brow, and the drill ended with Lena walking away, her shadow long under the lights. The camp commander, Cole. Hargrove was a man who lived for order. His office was all straight lines, polished, desk-framed metals, a flag that looked like it had never seen a breeze. He pulled Lena's file that afternoon, his fingers flipping through pages that were oddly blank. No combat unit, no rank, just a transfer to logistics with no explanation. He leaned back in his chair, his frown deepening. "This doesn't add up," he said to his aide, a nervous young man who nodded too quickly. Word spread fast. By evening, the mess hall was buzzing. No special records. "Probably just making things up," Jenkins said, his voice dripping with disdain. He was a loudmouth, the kind of guy who wore his insecurity like a badge, always looking for a fight. "TikTok tricks," Ellis added, her sharp nails tapping her tray. "Just lucky shots. No documents means she's nobody." Hargrove overheard and made a call. "Confiscate her weapon," he said, his voice clipped. Lena didn't argue when they took the rifle. She slid the magazine out, set the gun down, and walked away, her boots echoing in the quiet. That night, Lena sat on her bunk, her hands folded in her lap. The barracks were empty, the other recruits out at a card game in the rec room. She pulled the dog tag from her pocket, holding it up to the dim light. The name engraved on it was barely legible now, worn down by years of her touch. She remembered the day she'd gotten it handed to her by a medic in a field hospital, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and blood. Her friend had been laughing just hours before telling her about a diner back home, where the pie was worth dying for. Lena's jaw tightened and she tucked the tag away. She didn't sleep much that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, the hum of the barracks, her only company. The next morning, a routine inspection turned ugly. Hargrove's aide, a jittery officer named Bryce, decided to make an example of Lena's bunk. He stood over her neatly made bed, his clipboard shaking slightly as he pointed to her gear. "This is a mess park," he said, loud enough for the barracks to hear. "You call this military standard?" The other recruits gathered, smirking, sensing blood in the water. Bryce kicked her boots, sending one skidding across the floor. "And these? They're a disgrace." Lena stood at attention, her face blank but her hands clasped behind her back, tightened until her knuckles paled. Nguyen, standing nearby, flinched but said nothing. Bryce kept going, tossing her neatly folded jacket onto the floor. "Maybe you're better suited for laundry duty," he said, grinning. Lena bent down, picked up the boot and jacket, and set them back in place with deliberate care. "Anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice flat but sharp enough to cut. Bryce's grin faltered and he walked away, muttering about discipline. The phone in Hargrove's office rang at midnight. The voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. "Is Lena Park there?" Hargrove hesitated, his hand tightening on the receiver. "Yes, but we're unsure who she really is." The voice cut him off. "She's Ghost Eye, the only agent to complete Operation Falcon Down. If she asks for a weapon, don't question her. Hand her the black Talon." Hargrove's breath caught. General Deverick wasn't a man who exaggerated. He hung up, his face pale, and called Malone in. "Spread the word," he said, his voice low, quietly. But nothing stays quiet in a camp. By morning, the rumors were wildfire. "Ghost Eye." Her... Jenkins laughed, spitting out his coffee in the mess hall. "She looks like my mom going grocery shopping." Lucas was worse. He cornered Lena with two buddies, their voices loud, their postures aggressive. "Ghost Eye. That's the funniest thing I've heard." One said, a stocky guy with a shaved head named Pete. Carter." Lucas grabbed her collar, his smile gone. "Show us something, ghost lady." Lena didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the corner security camera, calm and steady like she knew someone was watching. Then she stepped back, her hands loose, and walked away. The mess hall incident sparked a new wave of tension. At lunch, a group of recruits decided to push further. Carter, egged on by Lucas, accidentally bumped Lena's tray as she walked to her table, sending her food a slice of chicken and some greens splattering across the floor. The room erupted in laughter, Carter's voice rising above it. "Oops, guess you're cleaning up anyway," he said, his grin wide. Lena stopped, her tray still in hand, the mess at her feet. She set the tray down on a nearby table, her movements slow, deliberate. Then she knelt, picking up the pieces one by one, her face unreadable. The laughter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence as recruits watched her. Nguyen stepped forward, his glasses slipping down his nose, and handed her a napkin. "Here," he said quietly. Lena took it, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment, and nodded. She finished cleaning, stood, and walked out, leaving the tray behind. Carter's grin faded, his hands fidgeting as the room's attention turned to him. The helicopter came at dusk the next day. The camp was still the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like everyone's holding their breath. 3 operatives in black stepped out. No names, no ranks, just a steel case with a claw mark etched into it. The lead operative, a woman with a scar across her jaw, scanned the crowd. "Lena Park," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Lena stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. The operative handed her the case, her movements formal, almost reverent. "Welcome back, Commander Ghost Eye," she said, bowing slightly. The camp froze. Jenkins dropped his cigarette, the ember hissing in the dirt. Lucas's face went slack, his arms falling to his sides. Lena opened the case, her fingers brushing the black Talon, a sleek custom rifle that looked like it could whisper death. She closed it again, her expression unchanged, and nodded to the operatives. They left without another word, the chopper's blades fading into the night. The news of the helicopter spread faster than the rumors. By breakfast, the mess hall was a mix of awe and disbelief. A group of recruits near Lena's table kept their voices low, but their words carried. "No way she's that Ghost Eye one," said a wiry woman with a scar on her cheek. "It's gotta be a mistake." Jenkins overheard and leaned in, his voice loud. "Mistake? She's playing us all. Probably paid someone to fake that stunt." Lena was at her usual corner table, her tray half empty. She paused, her fork hovering over her plate, then set it down gently. Without looking up, she said, "You talk a lot for someone who doesn't know." The room went quiet, Jenkins' face flushing red. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands balling into fists. Lena picked up her fork again, took a bite, and kept eating, her calm, slicing through the tension like a blade. Hargrove didn't waste time. He called a public training drill the next morning, the kind of event that drew every soldier on base. 500 men and women gathered around the field, their murmurs like static. Lena was the centerpiece, whether she liked it or not. Hargrove stood on a platform, his voice booming. Let's see if her skills are real. Lucas was in the front row, his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "No luck tricks this time," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. Lena ignored him. She stepped to the line, the black Talon in her hands. "Target number 9 at 1-800 meters, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "Barehanded." Lena nodded. The crowd shifted, some leaning forward, some scoffing. 1,800 meters was a shot most snipers wouldn't dream of without a scope, a spotter. A perfect day. The wind was strong, the air cold. Lena raised the rifle. Just before she took the shot, a recruit in the crowd, a cocky guy with a loud voice named Pivate, Daniel shouted, "Bet she misses and cries about it." The crowd tittered, some laughing, others glancing nervously at Lena. She didn't flinch, but her fingers adjusted on the black Talon, her grip tightening for a split second. Nguyen, standing nearby, clenched his jaw, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. Lena's eyes flicked to the target, her breath steady, her body still. The wind howled, kicking up dust that stung the eyes of the onlookers. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing, and pulled the trigger. The shot was a single soft growl. The target, nearly 2 kilometers away, shattered. The high-speed camera zoomed in, projected on a screen for everyone to see. The bullet had hit the signature on a brass badge pinned to the target, a mark no bigger than a dime. The crowd was silent, the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Hargrove stood slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the platform. Anyone who doubted her, he said, his voice low, should start drafting their transfer papers. Lena lowered the rifle, her face calm, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't look at Lucas, didn't look at Jenkins. She just set the Black Talon down and walked off the field. The fallout was quick. Jenkins was gone by the end of the week, his transfer to a desk job in a nowhere base pushed through without explanation. Lucas's name started trending on X for all the wrong reasons. Someone had leaked footage of his mess hall stunt, and the comments tore him apart. "Arrogant soldier gets humbled" was the top hashtag for days. Ellis lost her sponsorship deal with a military gear brand. Turns out they didn't like her attitude either. None of it was Lena's doing. She didn't need to lift a finger. The truth did the work for her, spreading like ripples across a pond. She kept to herself, eating alone, training. Alone, her boots still peeling, her uniform still faded. But now, when she walked through the camp, the whispers stopped. Eyes followed her, not with scorn, but with something else. Respect. Fear, maybe both. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.